Hello and welcome back to another episode of Screen Tested. I am your host Tyrant, and today, chains and whips excite me. Not like that, you degenerate. I'm talking about in the context of today's video. I'm a professional. So today we're going to be making Trevor Belmont's whip from the Castlevania series. Now, this is a bit of an interesting whip because first up, it's made out of chain, and it's kind of like a giant flail, if you ask me. It's made of chain, and it has an attachment right on the end of the whip, which is used to kill the vampires, and has fire in it. So it's not a very standard whip by any means. But we are going to attempt to make this whip today. Now, I like whips. I feel like so much of today's video can be taken out of context. So for the last couple of months, I've been practicing with whips to get better. I feel like everything I say just sounds odd now. Anyways, let's get started with today's project. Here I have some chain, and I'm going to be making a whip out of this to test Trevor Belmont's Castlevania whip. I am someone who loves most types of weapons. However, there are a couple of types of weapons that I simply do not like. One of them being spring-loaded weapons, I've mentioned this before, and another being articulated weapons. I have a particular disdain for articulated weapons. They are very unpredictable, and not only do they pose a threat to your opponent, but they pose a threat to you. Even with a lot of training, they can just be unpredictable by the very nature of how they exist. They're articulated. But what we're dealing with in today's video is, first up, a long amount of chain, so that gives us all the articulation we need, and then a force multiplier right at the very end. I feel like this is one of those weapons that is just such a dumb idea to make. But we will make it and we will test it, and I will reserve my judgment for how lethal it is till the very end. Hopefully it's not me that it's lethal on, but hey, we'll see how lethal it is in the end. Alright, let's talk about the deets of the build for this video. Honestly, I'm not really going for anything too accurate to the show, if I'm being honest, because it's going to take a lot of time and effort. So what I'm going to do is I just bought a whole bunch of hardware stuff, things like chains and D-shackles, a grappling hook. Yeah, I got a grappling hook, a little grappling hook that is. Now, I had this grappling hook for a different video. So yeah, you'll see a grappling hook video at some point, hopefully. But anyway, I just cut that off with a terrifying angle grinder, and then I flipped it inside out because I thought it kind of looked like the head of the Morningstar from the show, and I think it worked out. It's nice and terrifying, which is exactly what I was going for. Then I grabbed a axe handle, at least a hatchet handle, axe, hatchet, small axe handle, whatever you want to call it. Grabbed one of them and hooked the chain up to that, put a little bit of leather around it because, you know, it's vampires and they're into leather or whatever. Then I hooked up all the pieces of chain to the D-shackles because I want this thing to be functional. Remember, it's all about being functional. And then that pretty much concludes the build process. Something nice and easy and simple while also being functional and terrifying. Now, something I should mention is that this thing also can still be set on fire. Like, I can put flame in here and spin it around. I'm just not going to do that when it drags along the ground in a grassy area in the middle of summer. Just wanted to mention that before anybody asks why isn't it on fire. It can be on fire, but it's not going to be. Not right now, at least. So, just as a little bit of a baseline, I'll show you how I am with a normal whip. Trying to use it as a whip. It doesn't even want to. hate this weapon. I hate this f***ing weapon! We are finally here back in the workshop. I've had time to think, I've had time to collect my thoughts, and I've gone through the footage for the Castlevania Morningstar. And this thing was... I didn't like it. I didn't like it. And this is sad because when I started the video, I genuinely was excited. I thought this thing was going to be a monster. I thought this thing was going to be a beast. And it really wasn't. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't want to get hit with this. This thing can generate some force. However, there are some really big issues that I ran into. Now, starting off with the simplest one is range. This is about 2.5 meters of, steel chain. And trying to hit a small target, like trying to hit a water bottle or a coconut, for example, at 2.5 meters distance with about 4 inches, and the target itself is only a couple of inches wide, that's actually really difficult. That's one of those things where you would have to just practice with this thing non-stop to get really good just in your range. Obviously, I didn't have time to do that, so it was difficult for me, but I'm sure if you trained, you could probably get it in. However, the range was just terrible. So it doesn't work like a whip at all, period. A whip is very easy to use. They're very lightweight. The same thing with something like a rope dart. I know people are going to comment, like, why don't you use it like a rope dart? Why didn't you do this? Blah, blah. This is heavy. This is a very heavy piece of steel and very heavy piece of chain. But this brings me to another point, using the chain at full slack. Now, I'm going to try and explain this as the best way I can. So I'll throw up some footage just so I think a visual aid will be better. But what would happen was, when I would use it like a chain and I would put that force into the chain, it would send that force down the chain, pull the piece of steel, the head, the Morningstar, whatever we want to call it, it would pull that forward, not very far, by the way, pull that forward, and then once it did that, that would actually send a shockwave back up the chain, which would hit the handle and my hand. I really didn't like it. I thought it was it hurt, basically. So that was a huge issue I ran into right away, and that's why I started actually choking up on the chain, because first up, we had the range issue, and then we had the force being sent back into my hand, and the chain hitting my hand, so I choked up the chain and used it that way. I found that much more controllable, relatively speaking, and it was easier to use, and I was actually able to hit targets more consistently, because I was closer. Still terrifying, still dangerous, and I still felt the force when I would actually hit things with holding the chain. I felt the force a lot more, which didn't really feel too nice. Now, I know people are going to comment, why didn't you set it on fire? Don't worry, I did that as well. Here's the clips of it being on fire and being swung around. So this weapon is it's terrifying, and I wouldn't want to get hit with it, but at the same time, I don't think it's very practical, if I'm being honest. I feel like flails, are one thing. This monstrosity here, however, is just no good. It doesn't work like a whip, doesn't work like a flail either, really, and the chain is just way too long. I didn't like this. I didn't like this thing. But that's going to be all for today's episode. I genuinely hope you enjoyed. Remember to like and subscribe, leave a comment down below, and let me know what you thought of today's episode. Why don't you leave some suggestions of other things that I can build and test? Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in another episode. Bye-bye.